Hi guys, I'm Pete from dancemusicproduction.com, and in this video I've got 10 tips that every Serum user needs to know. Tip number 1. Sync envelopes to tempo. Hop over to the Global tab. Ensure you've got double click for typable values turned on. With that turned on, you can double click on a parameter and enter a value. So we can enter milliseconds, or for envelopes here, we can enter beat divisions, like a quarter note, for example, or any other beat division you want. And what that's going to do is calculate based on your project tempo. So I've got 120 here, how long a quarter note is, and enter that. So 500 milliseconds is a quarter note at 120 BPM. If we change this to something like 150, do the same again. 1/4. It goes away and calculates it for 150 BPM. Tip number 2, modulate by semitones in the mod matrix. By default, these sliders are set in a percentage value, which makes it really tricky when dealing with pitch destinations, like the master tune, for example. But again, if you've got double click to enter type of values, you can double click, enter a value that you want, say 7 semitones. If we follow that 7 with ST, it'll calculate it. It says 5, but that's 5%, 5 point something percent, which is 7 semitones. Likewise, 12 ST, that'll give us an octave. This only works on coarse tuning, so oscillator A, coarse pitch, B, coarse pitch, and the global master tune. Tip number 3, key command modifiers for LFO shapes. Obviously, click and drag a point to move it around. If you hold down Option while you're clicking and dragging, that'll snap to the grid in the background. Also with Option, you can move all the tension handles at once. So just grab one, it moves just one. Hold down Option, it'll move all together. This is the same if you've got more points in there as well. If you hold down Shift, you get a step sequencer. If you hold down Option and Shift, that will snap to the vertical grid as well. No Option, it goes wherever it wants on the vertical. And you don't have just the flat, you can also right click and choose ramp down or ramp up. And the step sequencer leads me on to tip number 4. Tip number 4, an arpeggiator inside of Serum. We go over to the mod matrix, set up LFO 1 to go to master tune, double click to enter 12 ST, gives us an octave. Make sure we're in unipolar mode and head back to the LFO 1. Now, if we move this grid to 12, each one of these vertical lines represents one semitone. Now, if we use our step sequencer, hold Shift and also Option to snap to the vertical grid, we can set that back to flat. We can set up an arpeggiator. I'll just do something simple for demonstration. Do 1, 1, 2, 3. 5 and 7. So we're going 1, 3, 5, 7. And there's your arpeggiator inside of Serum. Tip number 5, drag LFO shapes to oscillators. If you hold down Option and drag, you can actually drag the LFO shape to use as an oscillator. So that means you can draw some kind of crazy waveform. Who knows what? Something weird. Hold Option, drag it in. See what that sounds like. Tip number 6, hidden modulation sources. If you're new to Serum, it might seem like these are the only modulation sources down here, the ones that you can drag. But if you right click on a parameter, go down to mod source, there's a whole bunch of other ones you can use. You've got the ones that you can drag, like your LFOs and your envelopes, but you've also got aftertouch, chaos, random, and alternate. One of my favorites in here is the note on randoms, and I like to use it on the wavetable position. And I'll bring up a different wavetable that's got lots of different stuff in it. So now modulating that with note on random. So each note I press is going to have a different wavetable position. And if we head over to the matrix, we can limit the depth of that to wherever we want, and we can move that. I like using this for plucks and for ARPs that sit in the background to make each note slightly different and give it its own character. Tip number 7, velocity and note curve graphs. These guys down here. As you probably know, you can click and drag to make it exponential or logarithmic, but you can also double click to enter points and even use the key command modifiers, the same as the LFO graph, to move everything around. What's the point in that, you might ask? Well, if you've got a bass line or a melody that goes over only a few notes, you can make a graph that spans just those notes by following the green dot in there. And if we pull up a different wavetable, we modulate the wavetable position with that. Each note in that small range of notes gets a different wavetable position and can have a vastly different sound. Just adds interest. Tip number 8, modulation assignment curves. In the modulation matrix, you've got this curve parameter. You can drag it up to make it exponential, down to make it logarithmic. So just to demonstrate, I've got an LFO to the master tune to make an obnoxious sound. And if we drag this up, and down, you can hear the difference it makes. So you can use this curve parameter to change how a modulator affects a destination. Tip number 9, alternating between two different LFOs for the one parameter. I've got the default saw wave here, going through a filter. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to modulate the filter with LFO1 and LFO2. LFO1 is a triangle, LFO2 is a ramp up. To start with LFO1. We've now got the triangle modulating the filter. I'm going to go over to the matrix and set the aux to macro 1. What this means is macro 1 controls how much LFO1 modulates the filter. So at 0, it's not affecting the filter at all. As we move up, we get more and more until at 100% macro, we get the full depth that that's set for. To put that back down so no modulation's happening, and I'm going to go back to LFO2 now and set that to modulate the filter. Now we have the ramp. You can hear a slightly different sound. Back in the matrix, I'm also going to set this to macro 1. So now at 0, nothing happens. At 100%, we get both of them, which is not what we want. To alternate between the two, I'm going to set one of them to inverted. This means that the macro has the opposite effect for LFO1. At 0%, it's 100% depth. And 100% depth, none on LFO1, and still 100% on LFO2. And we can scale between them. As you know, or as you probably know, you can import your own audio to use as wavetables by dragging it over to the oscillator. When you drag a file there, you're presented with a bunch of different options. But what the hell do they all mean? Well, for tip 10, I'm going to explain what these mean. So the first two options, import normal dynamic pitch 0 snap and import normal dynamic pitch follow, are dynamic, obviously. It's in the name. Therefore, if your sound is changing in pitch, like it has some sort of pitch bend in there, for example, the size they capture for each table or each single cycle is dynamic. It's varying the size of capture for every single table based on how it believes the cycle or the pitch of each table is changing. The two different dynamic options work by generating a pitch map like you would see in Melodyne or any other pitch correction software, where you have a pitch contour. After it's generated the pitch map, it goes through and figures out how long it wants to capture and from where for each table or each single cycle. The first one, 0 snap, tries to snap to 0 crossings. It's better for simple waveforms like a saw wave that's got a bit of pitch bend, for example. The next one, dynamic pitch follow, is better for more complex material that changes in pitch and has lots of 0 crossings. The next option down, import constant frame size, pitch average, guesses the pitch of the file and uses that cycle length for every table. The FFT options down the bottom resynthesize the tables. They take chunks of time and look at what's going on in the frequency spectrum in that chunk of time and kind of average out what's going on. Then it resynthesizes a waveform based on what it has analyzed. Then it does the same thing for another slice of time that overlaps with the first one, and so on and so forth until it's done the whole thing. The FFT options create new waveforms, so it's not going to look like the original waveform, but it should sound something like it. The number after each, so 256, 512, 1024, 2048, is how many samples will be used in each chunk of time. The higher the number, the longer the slice of time analyzed, and therefore the higher in pitch it will sound because you can fit more cycles in. So which option should you use to import your audio? The first two dynamic ones are good for sounds that move in pitch. The next one, import constant frame size, is good for static pitches, and it's the best option to try first. And the FFT options are good for complex sounds. These can be great for animal sounds and all sorts of random stuff. But as always, it's best to experiment with all of them. If a sound doesn't sound good on one of them, try another one. And that wraps up my 10 tips that every Serum user needs to know. If you want to know more about Serum and how to use it, we have a tutorial course coming out soon at dancemusicproduction.com called Sessions Xfer Serum, where I cover all things Serum, every parameter, how it works, what it does, creative ways to use it, importing audio, making your own wavetables. We make a few patches. We have a lot of fun. Check it out. Once again, I'm Pete from dancemusicproduction.com. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in another video.